Flight attendant Margaret Winters stood frozen in the aisle as her career imploded before her eyes. Just 30 minutes ago, she'd asked those black teens to move from first class, a routine request in her 20 years of service. Now, the airline CEO himself was on the speakerphone, his voice thundering through the cabin. Every crew member involved will be terminated effective immediately. Passengers gasped as security escorted the flight crew off the plane. Margaret never imagined that asking the Caldwell siblings to surrender their seats would destroy everything she'd built. What would drive an airline to fire its entire crew mid-flight? And what really happened in those fateful 30 minutes? Before we begin this shocking true story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe in standing up against discrimination and fighting for justice, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more eye-opening stories of courage against injustice. Let's dive in. Zion and Zara Caldwell stepped onto American Airways Flight 3578 with the confident stride of two teens who had earned their place in the world. At 17 and 16 respectively, the siblings weren't your average teenagers. They were the brilliant children of Elijah Caldwell, founder and CEO of Cybersphere Technologies, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing tech companies. Today marked their first time flying first class, a surprise upgrade from their father as they traveled alone from Chicago to San Francisco for the National Young Innovators Competition. "Is this really our seat?" Zara whispered, running her hand over the plush leather of seat 2A as she settled in. Her dark eyes widened at the extra legroom and personal entertainment system, luxuries that felt worlds away from the cramped economy seats they were accustomed to. "Dad said we earned it," Zion replied, stowing his backpack carefully in the overhead compartment. Inside was their presentation on an AI-driven educational platform designed to bring advanced tech education to underserved communities, a project that had already earned them a finalist spot in the prestigious competition. The siblings shared a moment of quiet appreciation, remembering the countless late nights they'd spent coding and refining their project. For the past year, they had dedicated every free moment to developing technology that could change education in communities like the Southside Chicago neighborhood where their father had grown up before building his tech empire. "Remember when we were debugging until 4 in the morning last month?" Zara laughed, accepting a pre-flight orange juice from a flight attendant who barely made eye contact with her. "Worth every exhausted minute," Zion grinned, though his smile faltered as he noticed the passengers across the aisle, a middle-aged white couple in expensive clothing, whispering to each other while glancing disapprovingly in their direction. Zion adjusted his Cybersphere Technologies hoodie self-consciously. Despite the logo of their father's billion-dollar company emblazoned across his chest, he could feel the weight of their stares questioning his presence in first class. It was a familiar feeling, the silent interrogation of whether he belonged in spaces of privilege. As more first-class passengers boarded, the siblings became increasingly aware of the sideways glances and furrowed brows directed their way. A businessman in a tailored suit did a double-take upon seeing them, then checked his boarding pass as if to confirm he was in the right section. An older woman clutched her handbag tighter as she passed their row. "Just ignore them," Zara murmured to her brother, pulling out her tablet to review their presentation slides. "We're here because Dad wanted to reward our hard work. We deserve this just as much as anyone else." But the knot in Zion's stomach tightened when he noticed a gray-haired white passenger in a golf shirt lean over to a flight attendant, pointing subtly in their direction while whispering something with an expression of concern. The flight attendant, her name tag reading Margaret Winters, nodded with pursed lips, her eyes narrowing as she looked toward the Caldwell siblings. "I think we might have trouble," Zion whispered to his sister, nodding discreetly toward the ongoing conversation. Zara followed his gaze just in time to see Margaret straighten her uniform and begin walking purposefully toward their seats, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Excuse me," Margaret Winters said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she stood in the aisle beside the Caldwell siblings. "I need to check your boarding passes again." Her perfectly manicured fingers extended expectantly, despite having already scanned their tickets during boarding. Zion and Zara exchanged knowing glances before retrieving their phones to display their digital boarding passes. "Is there a problem?" Zion asked, maintaining the polite tone his parents had always emphasized when dealing with authority figures, especially as young black people in America. Margaret's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as she examined the boarding passes. "Well, it appears there's been some sort of computer error with your seating assignment," she declared, despite the clear seat numbers displayed on both passes. "These seats are actually reserved for our premium members. I'll need you both to move to economy class temporarily while we sort this out." "But we checked in online yesterday," Zara said, pulling up the confirmation email on her tablet. "Our father upgraded our tickets as a gift. We have the payment confirmation right here." Margaret's smile tightened. "I understand you think that's what happened, but sometimes these online systems can be confusing for younger travelers," she said, her condescension barely veiled. "These premium seats are typically reserved for our established business clients, who pay full fare." Several nearby passengers were now openly watching the interaction. The white couple who had been whispering earlier nodded approvingly at Margaret's handling of the situation. A businessman pretended to focus on his laptop, but was clearly listening to every word. "We're not confused," Zion stated firmly, feeling his heart rate increasing but keeping his voice steady. "Our boarding passes and confirmation clearly show we're assigned to these seats. We paid for first class and we're entitled to sit here." Margaret's facade of friendliness began to crack. "I don't appreciate your tone, young man. Perhaps you don't understand how seat assignments work on premium flights." Two more flight attendants appeared behind Margaret, a taller man with a close-cropped beard whose name tag read Brandon Morris, and a younger blonde woman identified as Heather Wilkins. Their arrival felt less like assistance and more like reinforcements being called in. "Is there an issue here, Margaret?" Brandon asked, his voice carrying throughout the first-class cabin. "These young people seem confused about their seating." "Assignment," Margaret replied loudly enough for other passengers to hear. "I've explained they need to move to their correct seats in economy." From across the aisle, a middle-aged white passenger in an expensive suit smirked and muttered to his seatmate, "Finally getting things back to normal around here." Zara's hands trembled slightly as she pulled up additional documentation. "We have our assigned seats right here. Seats 2A and 2B, first class. We have every right to be here." Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you move voluntarily to economy, or I'll have security remove you for being disruptive passengers. Your choice. Have you ever faced discrimination in a situation where you should have been treated equally? Comment number 1. If you've experienced prejudice in places where you had every right to be. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves fair treatment regardless of their age or race. Subscribe to hear more stories of injustice being confronted head-on by brave individuals. What would you do if you were in Zion and Zara's position? Give in to avoid conflict or stand your ground for what's rightfully yours? And what happens when these determined siblings refuse to be intimidated by airline staff who won't back down? The confrontation is about to reach a breaking point. "We're not moving," Zion stated firmly, making direct eye contact with Margaret. "We paid for these seats just like everyone else." Zara, sensing the escalating tension, discreetly slipped her phone from her pocket and began recording. With practiced movements, she positioned the device partially concealed by her tablet while ensuring it captured the interaction. Their parents had always emphasized the importance of documentation when encountering potential discrimination. Margaret's pleasant facade completely vanished. "Brandon, these passengers are being uncooperative and disruptive. Please contact security." Brandon nodded and stepped away, speaking quietly into his handheld radio. Heather remained alongside Margaret, arms crossed, creating a wall of authority against the teenage siblings. Around them, the first-class cabin had become uncomfortably quiet as passengers tuned into the drama unfolding. Some looked away in embarrassment, while others watched with undisguised interest. A gray-haired man in an expensive suit shook his head disapprovingly at the teens. Across the aisle, a middle-aged black woman in business attire frowned deeply at the flight attendants. "Those kids have their boarding passes," the woman said loudly. "I watched them scan through like everyone else. What's the real problem here?" Margaret shot the woman a warning look. "Ma'am, this is an airline matter. We have protocols that must be followed." Another passenger, a young white woman with glasses, spoke up. I don't understand why they need to move if they have confirmed seats. That doesn't seem right. Exactly, shouted an elderly Asian man from the third row. Leave those children alone. Others joined the chorus of dissent, creating a divide among the passengers, yet some sided with the crew. If the staff says they need to move, they should just follow instructions, a businessman commented. No need to create a scene. The cabin's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as two airport security officers boarded the plane. Officer Taylor Grant, a barrel-chested white man with a military-style haircut, and Officer Victor Perez, a younger Latino man, approached the Caldwell's seats. What seems to be the issue here? Officer Grant asked, directing his question to Brandon rather than the teens. These passengers refuse to comply with crew instructions, Brandon explained. They've been asked repeatedly to move to their proper seats in economy. That's not true, Zara protested. We have first-class tickets. They're discriminating against us because we're young and black. Officer Grant's expression hardened. Young lady, making false accusations won't help your situation. Airlines have the right to reassign seats as needed. Officer Perez, looking uncomfortable, glanced at the siblings' boarding passes. Do you have your ticket confirmations? Before either teen could respond, the airplane intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Kevin Reynolds speaking. We apologize for the delay in departure. We're currently dealing with some passengers who don't understand our policies. We'll be on our way shortly once this matter is resolved. Thank you for your patience. The public announcement sent a wave of murmurs through the cabin and further heightened the humiliation felt by the Caldwell siblings. Zion pulled out his phone to call their father, but the connection was poor inside the aircraft. No service, he muttered to Zara. I can't reach Dad. Sir, you need to put your phone away during boarding, Officer Grant instructed sternly. Now both of you, gather your belongings and move to economy class as instructed. We're not going anywhere, Zion insisted, his voice breaking slightly despite his determination to remain composed. We paid for these seats. Officer Grant's patience visibly thinned. This isn't a negotiation. Either you move voluntarily, or we'll have to remove you from the aircraft entirely. As Zion tried once more to reach their father, Officer Grant nodded to Officer Perez. They began removing the siblings' carry-on bags from the overhead compartment. Hey, those are our things, Zara protested. You can't just take our stuff. Passengers watched in horror as the situation escalated. Some recorded the incident on their phones while others looked away, uncomfortable with the unfolding scene. A few called out in protest, but most remained silent witnesses to the teens' humiliation. With their bags now in the officer's possession and the threat of complete removal from the flight looming, the Caldwell siblings faced a devastating choice: surrender their rightfully purchased seats or potentially miss their competition entirely. Just as Officer Grant placed his hand on Zion's shoulder to escort him from his seat, the teen's phone buzzed with an incoming video call. The screen illuminated with the contact photo of their father, Elijah Caldwell. Wait, Zion said firmly, pulling away from the officer's grip. That's our father calling. I need to answer this. Officer Grant hesitated, looking to Margaret for direction. She gave a dismissive wave. Make it quick, then you're moving. Zion answered the call, immediately activating the speakerphone function. Dad, we're having a problem on the flight. They're trying to make us give up our first-class seats. Elijah Caldwell's deep, authoritative voice filled the cabin. Who's trying to make you give up your seats? Put them on the phone right now. The sudden introduction of a powerful adult voice shifted the energy in the cabin. Margaret's expression flickered with uncertainty as she realized the teenagers might not be as unsupported as she had assumed. Sir, this is Margaret Winters, lead flight attendant. We've had a seating misunderstanding with your children. There's no misunderstanding, Elijah interrupted, his voice cutting like steel. My children have confirmed first-class seats that I personally purchased and upgraded. Who authorized you to remove them? The confidence in his tone caused several watching passengers to straighten in their seats. Even Officer Grant took a subtle step backward. Sir, sometimes our system shows. I'm not interested in your excuses, Ms. Winters. I want to speak to the captain immediately." "The captain is preparing for takeoff and cannot be disturbed," Brandon interjected, having returned to the scene. "I'm Elijah Caldwell, CEO of Cybersphere Technologies," came the measured response. "Trust me when I say your captain will want to take this call, now." A visible ripple of recognition passed through the first-class cabin at the mention of Cybersphere Technologies, a Fortune 500 company whose security software protected half the businesses in America. Several passengers who had been supportive of the crew's actions now looked uncertain, glancing between the teens and the flustered flight attendants. Margaret's face paled. "One moment, sir." She hurried to the cockpit, whispering urgently to Brandon and Heather. While the crew members conferred in hushed tones, the airline's regional manager, Patricia Coleman, was contacted through ground staff. Within minutes, she was rushing down the jetway and onto the plane, her face a mask of professional concern as she assessed the situation. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Patricia Coleman, Regional Operations Manager for American Airways. I'm deeply sorry for this misunderstanding. I've reviewed the reservation myself and can confirm your children are indeed assigned to these first-class seats." Elijah's voice remained cool. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Coleman. This is racial profiling, and I intend to hold everyone involved accountable. I want the names of every crew member who participated in attempting to remove my children from their rightfully purchased seats." Patricia's professional demeanor faltered momentarily. "Sir, I assure you we take these matters very seriously. We'll conduct a thorough investigation." "The investigation begins now," Elijah interrupted. "My children will remain in their assigned seats, and I want immediate disciplinary action for the staff involved. Otherwise, your airline will face legal action for discrimination, and I'll ensure this incident receives national media attention by the time your flight lands." The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed entirely. Margaret, who had returned from the cockpit, suddenly produced documentation she had claimed didn't exist moments earlier. "It seems there was a processing error in our system," she said stiffly, avoiding eye contact with the siblings. "Your seats are indeed confirmed. In first class. We apologize for the confusion." Officer Grant and Officer Perez awkwardly returned the siblings' bags to the overhead compartment, muttering apologies before quickly exiting the aircraft. Captain Reynolds emerged from the cockpit, his face ashen as he took the phone from Zion. "Mr. Caldwell, I want to personally apologize." "Save it," Elijah's voice thundered through the speaker. "I want your crew replaced before this flight takes off. I will not have my children subjected to the supervision of staff who just attempted to humiliate and discriminate against them." The captain swallowed hard. "Sir, replacing the entire crew would cause a significant delay. That's not my concern. Either the crew is replaced, or my attorney files discrimination charges against each staff member individually, as well as the airline, within the hour. Your choice." The ultimatum hung in the air as passengers watched the power dynamic completely reverse. The once authoritative crew now stood deflated as the truth of their actions became apparent to everyone aboard. 2 hours after the scheduled departure time, Flight 3578 finally took to the skies. The delay had been caused by the airline scrambling to find replacement crew members, as demanded by Elijah Caldwell. Most of the original staff had been removed, but due to staffing limitations, Margaret Winters had been allowed to remain on board, relegated to economy service and prohibited from entering the first-class cabin. Zion and Zara sat quietly in their original seats, the initial triumph of their victory now tempered by the palpable tension surrounding them. Some passengers had missed connections due to the delay and made their frustration known with pointed glares at the siblings. Others had approached during boarding to offer quiet words of support and shared stories of similar experiences. "I don't feel like we won anything," Zara whispered to her brother, fidgeting with her tablet. "Everyone's looking at us like we're troublemakers." Zion nodded, noticing how their fellow passengers now fell into two distinct camps. Those treating them with exaggerated courtesy, flight attendants offering extra snacks and passengers smiling too broadly, and those barely concealing their resentment, refusing eye contact and sighing loudly when the siblings spoke. "At least we kept our seats," Zion replied, trying to focus on the positive. Dad always says standing up for yourself is more important than being liked. Their momentary sense of justice was interrupted when the replacement head flight attendant, a woman named Diana Rogers, approached with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry to tell you this," Diana said quietly, "but we've just received word from baggage that your checked luggage couldn't be located before takeoff. It will likely arrive on tomorrow's flight from Chicago." Zara's stomach dropped. "What? Our presentation materials are in that luggage. We need them for the competition tomorrow morning." "I'm truly sorry," Diana responded, seeming genuinely concerned unlike the previous crew. "We'll provide overnight essentials and a stipend for replacement clothing at landing. I've already filed a priority trace on your bags." As Diana walked away, Zion leaned close to his sister. "That's too convenient to be an accident. They lost our specific bags out of hundreds?" "Exactly," Zara agreed. "Someone made sure our luggage disappeared." Throughout the flight, the siblings noticed Margaret frequently whispering to the remaining original crew members whenever they passed through the cabin. Each time this happened, small irritations followed. Their meal service accidentally skipped, until Zion had to request it, their food arriving cold while others received steaming plates. Bathroom-occupied signs illuminated for unusually long periods whenever they needed to use the facilities. "They're making it look like standard poor service," Zion observed, "but it's too consistent to be coincidental." 3 hours into the flight, Zara opened her carry-on to review backup presentation files on her tablet, only to discover her device no longer powered on, despite having been fully charged. Confused, she checked her backpack's side pocket where she kept her power bank. It was missing. "Zion, someone took my charger," she whispered urgently, "and my tablet was working fine earlier. It shouldn't be dead already." Zion immediately checked his own bag and found his laptop's charging cable had been cut, with the damage carefully positioned where it wouldn't be immediately visible. When he tried to power on his computer, the screen displayed corrupted file warnings. "They've sabotaged our devices," he said, voice tight with anger and disbelief. "When the bags were removed earlier, they must have done something then." Zara's eyes widened in panic. "Our entire presentation, all our work." "I backed up most files to cloud storage last week," Zion assured her, though his expression remained grim. "But not the latest version with all our final refinements." As the reality of their situation sank in, Zara fought back tears. Their moment of victory in keeping their seats had been merely the opening move in a more insidious game. Someone wanted to ensure they failed at the competition, and they had been calculating enough to make it look like unfortunate circumstances rather than deliberate sabotage. Have you ever experienced someone trying to sabotage your success after you stood up for yourself? Comment number 1 if you've faced retaliation for advocating for your rights. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment and fair opportunity regardless of race or age. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about overcoming injustice. What would you do if you were in Zion and Zara's position, with your professional materials sabotaged right before a major competition? And what new challenges await the Caldwell siblings when they land in San Francisco? The battle for justice is far from over. When Flight 3578 touched down at San Francisco International Airport, the Caldwell siblings discovered that their troubles were only beginning. As passengers disembarked, Zion received an urgent text from their father. "PR crisis unfolding. Airline, spinning the story. Call me the moment you land." In the terminal, televisions mounted throughout the concourse displayed breaking news chyrons about an entitled CEO's children cause major flight delay. On their phones, the siblings found social media already ablaze with hashtags like Caldwell Tantrum and My Privilege on display. "How are they twisting this so quickly?" Zara gasped, scrolling through Twitter where a clip from the plane's security camera showed them an animated conversation with the flight attendants, but conveniently excluded the beginning of the interaction where they had been asked to move, despite having valid tickets. Zion dialed their father as they walked briskly through the terminal. "Dad, what's happening?" "The airline's PR team is working overtime," Elijah explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They're painting you as entitled rich kids who demanded special treatment, and me as a powerful CEO who threatened innocent employees. They've released selected clips from the plane's security footage that make you look agitated without showing what led to it. But that's not what happened, Zara protested, loud enough for nearby travelers to turn and stare. Several whispered, in recognition, pointing at the siblings. I know, Elijah responded. Our legal team is already demanding the full, unedited footage, but American Airways is claiming it will take time to compile, and meanwhile, their narrative is spreading. Richard Whitmore, their VP of Operations, has given 3 interviews already characterizing this as wealthy privilege threatening working-class jobs. As if to confirm their father's words, Zion's phone buzzed with a message from the competition. Organizers, in light of recent public controversy, please contact us immediately regarding your participation status. They're trying to get us disqualified, Zion realized, showing the message to Zara. That's not all, Elijah continued. I'm getting reports that other competitors are being approached by airline representatives, suggesting they should distance themselves from you at the competition. Just then, Zara received a notification from their hotel. Oh no, the Marquis Grand just canceled our reservation claiming they're overbooked. Dad, we have nowhere to stay. That's impossible, Elijah responded. I confirmed that reservation myself yesterday. A quick search revealed that every major hotel near the competition venue was suddenly fully booked or offering rooms at triple the normal rate, only for the Caldwell siblings. This is coordinated, Zion concluded. Someone's making calls to make sure we have nowhere to stay. They made their way to the baggage claim area, although they already knew their checked luggage wouldn't be there. The baggage service representative seemed genuinely apologetic until she looked up their names in the system. Her demeanor instantly cooled. Oh, the Caldwells, she said flatly. Yes, I've been briefed about your situation. We'll contact you if your bags turn up. As they exited the airport, local journalists were already waiting with cameras and microphones. Zion, Zara, how do you respond to accusations that you used your father's influence to have innocent airline employees fired? A reporter called out. Is it true you refused to follow safety instructions? Shouted another. What do you say to the families of the crew members who lost their jobs today? Overwhelmed, the siblings pushed through the crowd toward the rideshare pickup area, only to find that their accounts had been suspended due to violations of community guidelines. They're trying to strand us completely, Zara realized, fighting back tears of frustration. Their father arranged for a private car service, but by the time they reached the competition venue to check in, they encountered more hostile stares from organizers who had been watching the news. We're still verifying all participants' eligibility, the registration coordinator said stiffly. We'll let you know our decision by morning. Exhausted and demoralized, the siblings finally secured a room at a small motel miles from the venue, using a booking under their father's assistant's name to avoid further cancellations. They're not just trying to inconvenience us, Zion said, as they settled into the dated room. They're systematically trying to destroy our reputation and prevent us from even competing. Zara nodded grimly. This is about way more than airplane seats now. Morning brought no relief as Zion and Zara attempted to salvage their competition preparations. With their main devices compromised and original materials missing, they worked frantically on the motel's sluggish Wi-Fi to recreate their presentation from cloud backups. I've been researching Margaret Winters while you worked on the slides, Zion said, turning his rental laptop toward his sister. Look what I found. On the screen was a LinkedIn profile showing Margaret's membership in an organization called Airline, a little-known industry lobby group described as preserving traditional airline culture and standards. That sounded suspicious, so I dug deeper, Zion continued, opening several more tabs. Check this out. Airline has been quietly fighting against diversity initiatives in aviation. They've opposed hiring quotas, multicultural training programs, and even filed briefs against discrimination lawsuits brought by minority passengers. Zara leaned closer to the screen. And Margaret is their regional coordinator for the Midwest? Exactly. And that's not all, Zion replied, pulling up a series of redacted complaint forms. Dad's contacts at the Department of Transportation sent these over. Margaret has had 6 prior incidents with minority passengers in first and business class, all resolved internally, with no disciplinary action. How is that possible? Zara asked. That many complaints should have triggered some kind of review. Zion clicked to another document, an organizational chart of American Airways executive leadership. Because her cousin is Richard Whitmore, the VP of operations who's been attacking us in the press. Zara's eyes widened. Wait, the same Richard Whitmore who's been on TV claiming we're entitled rich kids who got innocent people fired? The very same. And look at this, Zion said, showing her an email thread their father had forwarded. Richard has been systematically burying discrimination complaints for years, not just for Margaret, but for dozens of crew members who share their views. The siblings stared at each other as the implications sank in. This wasn't merely about one flight attendant's bias or even a PR team's damage control. They had stumbled into a coordinated network of discrimination that reached into the executive levels of one of America's largest airlines. There's more, Zion said grimly. Remember Dad's new AI ethics initiative at Cybersphere? The one that's developing algorithms to detect patterns of biased treatment in transportation and service industries. The Equality Metrics Project, Zara nodded. They're launching the beta testing phase next month. And guess which airline would be the perfect test case with their thousands of documented customer interactions? Understanding dawned on Zara's face. American Airways. Dad's company could expose their whole system. Which makes us not just random black kids in first class, but specific targets, Zara finished. They probably recognized Dad's name when they looked up our reservation. Their phones simultaneously pinged with news alerts. Local stations were now requesting interviews with the privileged teens who caused an aviation incident, while social media had exploded with competing hashtags. Airline racism trending alongside Dr. Caldwell's lied. As Zion scrolled through the mentions, his phone rang with an unknown number. Hesitantly, he answered and put it on speaker. Zion Caldwell? A deep voice asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Richard Whitmore, VP of Operations at American Airways. His tone was professionally measured but carried an undercurrent of threat. I wanted to speak with you directly about resolving this unfortunate situation. The siblings exchanged wary glances. We're listening, Zion replied cautiously. These public disputes benefit no one, Richard continued smoothly. Your father's company has important business relationships in the transportation sector, as does our airline. I'm prepared to issue a mutual statement chalking this up to a misunderstanding if you're willing to stop pursuing this matter. A misunderstanding? Zara repeated incredulously. Your staff tried to remove us from seats we paid for because of our race. That's a serious allegation, young lady. Richard's voice hardened. One that could be considered defamatory without substantial evidence. Evidence I'm certain you lack. We have recordings, Zion countered. Partial recordings that won't hold up against our complete security footage and crew testimony, Richard dismissed. Let me be perfectly clear. If you continue pushing this narrative, American Airways will be forced to protect its reputation with a defamation lawsuit naming both of you personally. As minors, that could affect your college admissions, future, employment, everything. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. You have until 5 p.m. to decide, Richard concluded. Drop this now, or prepare for consequences that will follow you for decades. Your technology careers would be over before they've begun. The line went dead, leaving the siblings in stunned silence. Despite the looming threat of Richard Whitmore's ultimatum, Zion and Zara made their way to the Pinnacle Innovation Center, where the National Young Innovators Competition was being held. With borrowed equipment and hastily reconstructed presentations, they were determined to complete the mission they had come for, showcasing their AI educational platform. I feel like everyone's staring at us, Zara whispered, as they entered the gleaming convention center lobby. News about the airline incident had spread throughout the tech community, and competitors who had previously been friendly during online preparation sessions now avoided eye contact or huddled in whispers as the siblings passed. Just focus on why we're here, Zion reminded her, though he too felt the weight of judging eyes. Our project can help thousands of kids access technology education they'd never get otherwise. At the registration desk, the coordinators smile, faltered upon seeing their names. Oh, the Caldwells. Yes. After review, the committee has decided to allow your participation. However, there's been a schedule change. You'll be presenting last tomorrow instead of in the third group today. Being placed last was typically disadvantageous. Judges would be tired, and the project would have less time to generate buzz before the awards ceremony. It was yet another subtle way to diminish their chances. As they set up in their assigned booth, Zara noticed several judges walking the floor, engaged in animated conversations with other competitors. Not one stopped at their station despite making rounds to every other project. They're avoiding us deliberately, she noted, adjusting their display board. We'll have to be twice as impressive during the actual presentation. A few hours into the day, an older man in a perfectly tailored suit approached their booth. Unlike the other judges, he seemed intensely interested in their project, asking detailed questions about their implementation and business model. Fascinating approach, he commented, examining their prototype interface. Bringing advanced computing concepts to under-resourced schools could transform the tech pipeline. I'm Frederick Winters, by the way. Private equity. The siblings exchanged a quick glance at the familiar surname. Any relation to Margaret Winters? Zion asked carefully. The man's friendly demeanor didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. My sister-in-law, actually. Small world, isn't it? The aviation incident you were involved in has been quite the topic of conversation. It wasn't an incident, Zara corrected firmly. It was discrimination. Frederick waved dismissively. Young people often misinterpret complex situations. Regardless, I'm more interested in your technology right now. I oversee several investment portfolios, including significant stakes in, he paused for effect, American Airways, coincidentally. The implied connection wasn't subtle. This man had financial influence over both the airline and potentially the competition itself. I also sit on the board of 3 major tech incubators that frequently recruit from this very competition, he continued. Careers can be made or limited based on the impressions formed here. The threat hung in the air, cloaked in polite business speak, but unmistakable in its intent. After Frederick departed, the siblings used a break to research the competition. Judges. What they discovered was alarming. 2 of the 5 judges had significant investments in American Airways, and another was a former fraternity brother of Richard Whitmore. This is rigged against us from the start, Zara said, slumping in her chair. Their day worsened when an anonymous email arrived containing their competition schedule and hotel information, details that should have been private, along with a message. Walk away now. You won't win. Your safety isn't guaranteed. Despite the intimidation, they worked through the evening in their motel room, refining their presentation and rehearsing answers to potential questions. Sleep came fitfully, both siblings jolting awake at every sound outside their door. Morning arrived with a devastating discovery. When they reached the convention center for final preparations, they found their demonstration equipment had been tampered with overnight. Despite the venue's supposed security, someone had gained access to their booth and damaged the circuit boards of their prototype teaching devices. This can't be happening, Zara whispered, hands shaking as she examined the meticulously cut wires that would have taken specialized knowledge to identify. Without the working prototype, we're just showing slides and making claims we can't prove. The competition coordinator offered only a perfunctory investigation. The security footage from that section had a technical glitch last night. Unfortunately, without evidence of who might have done this, there's nothing we can do. With mere hours before their presentation and their chances of success systematically dismantled, the Caldwell siblings faced their darkest moment. The forces aligned against them had proven willing to go to extraordinary lengths to ensure they failed, not just in maintaining their airplane seats, but in their academic and professional aspirations. Have you ever had someone deliberately sabotage your work or opportunities because you stood up against injustice? Comment number 1. If you've experienced people trying to silence you when you fought for what's right, Hit that like button if you believe young innovators deserve fair treatment regardless of their race or background. Subscribe to see how these brilliant siblings fight back against a system determined to crush them. Will Zion and Zara find a way to salvage their presentation against impossible odds? And how far will the airline executives go to protect their discriminatory practices? The battle is about to move from the convention center to the court of public opinion. The story of the Caldwell siblings had exploded across national media by the afternoon of the competition. What began as a local controversy had transformed into a nationwide debate about privilege, corporate power, and racial discrimination in America. Major networks ran competing headlines: CEO privilege, how money talks louder than rules versus racial profiling at 30,000 feet, the Caldwell siblings fight for dignity. Elijah Caldwell had arrived in San Francisco, bringing with him a team of civil rights attorneys and digital forensics experts. He'd booked a conference room at a major hotel and called a press conference to counter the airline's narrative. Only to find the hotel had suddenly experienced plumbing issues in that specific room. "They're still trying to silence us," he told his children as they relocated to a smaller venue. "But they've underestimated how many allies we have." The press conference proceeded despite the venue change, with major networks carrying it live. Elijah stood tall before the cameras, his children beside him as he methodically outlined the facts. "My children were humiliated and discriminated against for one reason only. They were black teenagers in first class," he stated firmly. American Airways has attempted to twist this narrative into one about privilege, but ask yourselves, would white teenagers have been asked to surrender their legitimate seats? Would they have been threatened with security removal despite having valid boarding passes? As Elijah spoke, social media erupted with support. Former American Airways employees began sharing their own stories of witnessing discrimination within the company, uploading redacted complaint forms and internal emails that substantiated patterns of racial bias. "I was told to prioritize our traditional clientele in first class," wrote one former flight attendant, attaching screenshots of training materials with thinly veiled coded language. Another former employee revealed, "Any discrimination complaints against certain protected staff members were automatically diverted to special handlers, never addressed through normal channels." But the airline wasn't surrendering the narrative. Within hours, Margaret Winters and Richard Whitmore appeared together on a conservative news network, their expressions solemn and voices quavering with performative emotion. "We've dedicated our lives to customer service," Margaret said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "To be labeled as racist for simply following company protocols is devastating." Richard nodded gravely beside her. "What we're seeing is the dangerous power of cancel culture. One wealthy CEO didn't like that his children were asked to follow standard procedures, so he's trying to destroy the livelihoods of working-class Americans." The interviewer, known for his softball questions to corporate representatives, asked, sympathetically, "How has this affected you personally, Margaret?" "I can't even go to the grocery store without receiving threats," she claimed, though no evidence of any threats existed. "My 25 years of spotless service means nothing now." Meanwhile, American Airways announced an internal investigation into the incident, headed by a committee that, internet sleuths quickly discovered, consisted primarily of executives with direct ties to Richard Whitmore. "This isn't an investigation, it's a cover-up," Zion observed as they watched the announcement. On the motel television, their father's phone rang constantly with updates from his corporate security team. "They're targeting our business now," he informed his children grimly. "There's a coordinated campaign of fake reviews against Cybersphere, claiming our software has security flaws. Our stock dropped 6% this morning." The battle extended beyond media into their personal lives. Zion received an alert from a friend back in Chicago. Their high school had received a bomb threat, specifically mentioning the Caldwell siblings as the reason. Though quickly determined to be a hoax, it had caused a full evacuation and panic among students and parents. "They're trying to make our friends and community turn against us," Zara realized, scrolling through her social media feeds where classmates were posting messages ranging from supportive to accusatory. The most insidious attack came just as the siblings were preparing to leave for the final day of the competition. Several photos appeared on multiple platforms showing Zion and Zara Caldwell supposedly partying at a San Francisco nightclub during the hours they were actually preparing their presentation. The obviously doctored images showed teens who vaguely resembled them holding alcohol and acting inappropriately. "This is ridiculous," Zara exclaimed. "I've never even been to a nightclub, and that's not even what my hair looks like." Despite the absurdity of the photos, they spread rapidly, with captions suggesting the siblings were celebrating getting innocent people fired, rather than focusing on their competition. "They're getting desperate," their father noted, examining the poorly edited images. "But desperate people make mistakes, and each one of these attacks leaves evidence we can trace." As they headed to the competition for their final presentation, Elijah received a call from the family's attorney. "We've got something big," the lawyer said, his voice animated with excitement. "One of Richard's assistants just came forward, as a whistleblower, says she has emails proving this whole campaign was orchestrated from the top." For the first time in days, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. The tide of public opinion was already beginning to turn in their favor, with truth for the Caldwells trending nationally. But the siblings knew the most crucial battle still lay ahead: delivering their presentation, despite the sabotage, and proving they belonged in the innovation space, regardless of attempts to exclude them. Elijah Caldwell arrived at the Pinnacle Innovation Center with an entourage that commanded immediate attention. Flanking him were 3 prominent civil rights attorneys, a team of digital forensic experts carrying specialized equipment, and 2 former FBI cybersecurity specialists now employed by Cybersphere Technologies. Their presence transformed the atmosphere of the competition hall, with whispers spreading rapidly among participants and judges. Zion and Zara, who had been systematically isolated throughout the competition, suddenly found themselves surrounded by formidable support. Their father's expression was resolute as he inspected their sabotaged equipment. "We've documented everything," he told them, photographing the damaged components. "But more importantly, we've been busy overnight." He handed each of his children a sealed envelope. "Cease and desist letters are being delivered simultaneously to 27 media outlets that published false information about you. Our legal team has already secured emergency injunctions against the most damaging content." One of the attorneys, Vanessa Washington, a legendary civil rights lawyer known for her perfect record against corporate discrimination cases, approached with a tablet displaying security camera footage. "We obtained this from alternative security systems in the convention center," she explained, showing crisp video of a figure entering the Caldwell's booth at 2:17 a.m. The venue claimed their cameras had technical issues, but they forgot about the private system installed by the building's insurance company. The footage clearly showed Frederick Winters, Margaret's brother-in-law, methodically sabotaging their demonstration equipment with specialized tools. "He's not just family to Margaret. He sits on American Airways' board of directors," Vanessa continued. "This connects the airline directly to the sabotage of your competition entry." While the legal team worked, Elijah's digital security experts were conducting their own investigation. They had obtained the complete, unedited security footage from Flight 3578 through a court order, footage the airline had claimed would take weeks to compile. "This is damning," the lead security expert said, showing Elijah a comparison between the clips released by the airline and the complete footage. "They deliberately released only segments showing your children's reactions, completely omitting the provocation and discrimination that preceded them." The forensics team had also traced the origin of the fake nightclub photos, finding direct links to an IP address within American Airways corporate headquarters. Even more significantly, they had recovered deleted security footage from the baggage handling area, showing Margaret Winters personally directing the removal of the siblings' luggage before takeoff. Armed with this evidence, Elijah's team moved quickly. Cease and desist letters were delivered to media outlets spreading the airline's false narrative. The complete flight footage was provided to more reputable news organizations. And most decisively, the team submitted formal complaints with the Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Vanessa Washington convened a small but powerful press briefing directly outside the competition venue. "What we're witnessing is not merely a case of individual bias, but systematic corporate-sanctioned discrimination, she announced to gathered reporters. American Airways executives not only failed to address racial profiling by their employees, but actively participated in retaliating against minors who dared to stand up for their rights. Inside the venue, the competition committee was thrown into disarray. 2 judges recused themselves after Elijah's team privately presented evidence of their conflicts of interest with American Airways. The remaining judges, unwilling to be associated with potential discrimination, insisted on bringing in a new panel to evaluate the Caldwell's project impartially. Meanwhile, American Airways Board of Directors called an emergency meeting as their stock plummeted in response to the mounting scandal. Multiple board members began distancing themselves from Richard Whitmore, with several calling for his immediate resignation. Anonymous airline employees, emboldened by the public attention, began leaking internal documents through secure channels to Elijah's team. Training materials with coded language about maintaining the premium class atmosphere. Email threads discussing passenger profile cohesion in first class. An internal presentation about traditional customer expectations that featured exclusively white passengers in premium cabins. By afternoon, the airline's carefully constructed narrative had completely collapsed. Richard Whitmore was seen being escorted from corporate headquarters, his personal items in a box, as reporters shouted questions he refused to answer. The most dramatic moment came when Margaret Winter's complete employment record was leaked online, revealing 17 previous discrimination complaints that had been systematically buried or dismissed. Among them were incidents involving a black U.S. senator, a famous Latino surgeon, and an Asian tech executive, all of whom had been challenged about their first-class seats despite having valid tickets. As the evidence mounted, Margaret appeared, again on television, this time attempting to portray herself as a scapegoat. "I was just following the unwritten policies we were all taught," she claimed tearfully. "Richard and the executives approved everything we did. We were trained to maintain the expected atmosphere in premium cabins." Her attempt to shift blame only accelerated the scandal, with unwritten policies becoming a trending topic as more airline employees came forward with their experiences. For the Caldwell siblings, this vindication came just in time. With new judges in place and replacement equipment provided by Cybersphere engineers, they finally had the opportunity to present their AI education platform as originally intended. "Despite everything that's happened," Zion told the judges, "our focus remains on creating technology that expands opportunity for underserved communities. The discrimination we experienced is exactly why tools like ours are so necessary, to help build a future where talent and innovation are recognized regardless of race or background." Their presentation was met with enthusiastic applause, stark contrast to the isolation they had faced earlier in the competition. As the new panel of judges asked engaged, thoughtful questions about their technology, it became clear that their work would finally be evaluated on its merits alone. Just as their presentation concluded, Zara received an urgent message from their father. "Turn on any news channel now." The American Airways crisis had escalated to the point where the airline's board of directors had called an emergency all-hands meeting that was being covered live by business news networks. On screens throughout the competition venue, attendees watched as the board chairwoman, Eleanor Richards, addressed a room filled with nervous executives and journalists. "After reviewing the evidence presented to us over the past 48 hours, American Airways acknowledges that serious breaches of our non-discrimination policies occurred on Flight 3578, she announced, her voice steady but tense. "Effective. Immediately, the following personnel changes are being implemented." The camera panned across a row of grim-faced executives as she continued. "Margaret Winters, Brandon Morris, Heather Wilkins, and Captain Kevin Reynolds have been terminated from employment with American Airways. Further, Richard Whitmore has been asked to resign from his position as Vice President of Operations, which he has done as of this morning." Murmurs rippled through the competition hall as students and judges alike processed the unprecedented public accountability taking place in real time. The Caldwell siblings stood frozen, watching as justice unfolded on screens above them. "Additionally," Eleanor continued, "American Airways is announcing a complete overhaul of our training programs, anti-discrimination policies, and internal reporting structures. We will be partnering with civil rights organizations to implement mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff. The chairwoman's expression hardened. Let me be absolutely clear. Discrimination has no place at American Airways. What happened to Zion and Zara Caldwell was unacceptable, and we offer them our sincerest apology. Back at the competition, the atmosphere had transformed entirely. Competitors who had previously avoided the Caldwells now approached with congratulations and expressions of support. The revised judging panel had sequestered themselves to evaluate all entries without bias, bringing in additional experts to ensure fairness. It shouldn't have taken all this for people to see us as equals, Zara said quietly to her brother as they packed up their presentation materials. But maybe it will help the next black kids who find themselves in first class. When the judges emerged from deliberation, the head judge, Dr. Rosalind Carter, a respected computer scientist and diversity advocate brought in specifically to address the controversy, took the stage. Before announcing our decisions, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this competition, she began. Several participants faced obstacles beyond the normal challenges of innovation, including direct sabotage of their work. In light of this, our panel has made an unprecedented decision to evaluate not only the technical merit of each project, but also the resilience and ethical foundation demonstrated by the participants. The siblings exchanged nervous glances as Dr. Carter continued. Our grand prize winners have created a platform that not only shows technical excellence, but addresses critical issues of access and opportunity in STEM education. Their project demonstrates how AI can be leveraged to identify and overcome systemic barriers, a mission that takes on special significance given the challenges they themselves faced in bringing it to us. She paused, looking directly at the Caldwell siblings. The grand prize of the National Young Innovators Competition goes to Zion and Zara Caldwell for their AI educational access platform. Applause erupted throughout the hall as the siblings made their way to the stage, stunned by the turn of events. As they accepted the award, venture capitalists and tech industry leaders lined up to speak with them, many offering funding and development support for their platform. The victory was made sweeter when competition officials announced that Frederick Winters had been banned from all future events and referred to prosecutors for criminal charges related to the sabotage of a minor's academic work. As they stood triumphant on stage, major news networks cut away from the American Airways press conference to cover their win, creating a split-screen moment that perfectly captured the day's dramatic reversal of fortune. But just as victory seemed secure, the convention center doors burst open dramatically. Richard Whitmore, his face flushed with anger and desperation, strode into the hall accompanied by a team of lawyers and PR representatives. "This entire competition is fraudulent," he shouted, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "The Caldwells manipulated the judges and manufactured a discrimination scandal to cover for their own entitled behavior." Security personnel moved toward him, but Richard's lawyers blocked their path with promises of lawsuits and injunctions. The disgraced executive approached the stage, camera phones recording his every move. "I have proof that these children fabricated everything," he claimed, waving a folder dramatically. "Recordings that will exonerate Margaret Winters and expose the Caldwells' deception." It was the last desperate gambit of a man who had lost everything: his position, his reputation, and his power. But it threatened to cast a shadow over what should have been the siblings' moment of triumph. The convention center fell silent as Richard Whitmore stood below the stage, his face twisted with righteous indignation as he waved his folder of supposed evidence. For a moment, doubt flickered across the room. Had there been some misunderstanding? Some crucial piece of evidence the public hadn't seen? That moment of uncertainty was shattered when Zara Caldwell quietly stepped forward. With calm dignity that belied her 16 years, she took the microphone. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been recording this entire ordeal since it began on the airplane," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Would you like me to play the complete audio for everyone here?" Without waiting for his response, she nodded to the technical staff. The convention center speakers came alive with crystal-clear audio from Flight 3578, beginning with Margaret Winters' first approach to their seats. "Excuse me, I think you may be in the wrong section. Margaret's condescending voice echoed throughout the hall. The recording continued, capturing every moment of the discrimination in unflinching detail. The initial questioning, the escalating hostility, the threats, and finally the intervention from their father, unlike the edited clips released by the Airline. This was the raw, unfiltered reality of what the siblings had endured. As the recording played, Richard's face drained of color. The folder in his hand, likely containing selectively edited materials, hung limply at his side. Security personnel stepped forward again, and this time his lawyers made no move to intervene. When the recording concluded, Zara spoke again. "That's the unedited truth, Mr. Whitmore. I have similar recordings of your brother-in-law sabotaging our equipment, your staff threatening us at the hotel, and your personal phone call threatening legal action if we didn't stay silent." Richard stood frozen, his final desperate play completely neutralized by a teenager who had been smart enough to document everything. Without another word, he allowed security to escort him from the building as attendees captured his humiliation on hundreds of phone cameras. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of the Caldwell case transformed the airline industry. American Airways announced the siblings as special consultants for their new inclusion training program, a role that came with substantial compensation and the authority to review and approve all new diversity protocols. The airline's board created an independent oversight committee specifically tasked with investigating discrimination complaints. The Department of Transportation launched a broader investigation into discriminatory practices across multiple airlines, using data analysis methods similar to those the Caldwells had developed for their AI education platform. Margaret Winters and her fellow terminated employees faced civil rights violation charges, with federal prosecutors pursuing the case as an example of corporate-sanctioned discrimination. The siblings' technology project received over $20 million in venture capital funding, with their AI education platform being piloted in 100 underserved schools across the country. Their experience had only strengthened their commitment to creating technology that could identify and address systemic inequities. 6 months after the incident, Zion and Zara were invited to be keynote speakers at the National Transportation Equality Summit, an event attended by airline executives, government officials, and civil rights leaders. As they took the stage, together, they unveiled the next evolution of their work, an AI system designed specifically to detect patterns of biased treatment in customer service interactions across transportation, hospitality, and retail sectors. What began as a humiliating experience on an airplane has transformed into a movement for accountability, Zion told the audience. Our technology can now identify subtle patterns of discrimination that might otherwise go unnoticed or be dismissed as isolated incidents. As the siblings concluded their presentation, Zara gestured toward a young woman waiting in the wings. "We'd like to introduce our newest team member, who brings a unique perspective to our work." To the audience's astonishment, Catherine Whitmore, Richard's daughter, walked onto the stage. She stepped to the microphone with visible emotion. "My father taught me many things growing up," she said, her voice steady despite the personal cost of her presence. "But watching the Caldwells stand up for what's right taught me something more important, that systems of discrimination can only persist when good people remain silent. I've chosen to break that silence, even within my own family." Her collaboration with the siblings, bringing insider knowledge of corporate practices together with their technical expertise, created a powerful statement about breaking cycles of prejudice and the possibility of redemption and change. As the summit concluded, the Caldwell siblings stood not merely as victims who had received justice, but as architects of systemic change. Their experience had transformed from a personal trauma into a catalyst for industry-wide accountability. What began with 2 teenagers refusing to surrender their first-class seats had evolved into a movement that would protect countless future travelers from facing the same discrimination. In a final poetic turn of justice, the last American Airways employee involved in the incident, Captain Kevin Reynolds, was hired by a smaller regional airline after months of unemployment. His first assignment? A flight carrying Elijah Caldwell and his children to receive a National Civil Rights Award, with Elijah upgrading to first class, the flight attendant who had initially supported his children during their ordeal. The message was clear: dignity, and respect were not privileges to be earned, but rights that belonged to everyone regardless of their age or the color of their skin. The story of Zion and Zara Caldwell teaches us several powerful lessons about confronting discrimination in modern America. First, documentation is crucial. Zara's decision to record every interaction provided irrefutable evidence that countered manipulation and lies. Second, systems of discrimination often extend beyond individual actors to institutional structures that protect and enable bias. The connection between Margaret Winters and executives who shielded her revealed how discrimination becomes entrenched in corporate cultures. Third, privilege and power can be weaponized in both directions, either to perpetuate injustice or to fight it. The Caldwells used their resources not just for personal vindication, but to create lasting change that would benefit others without their advantages. Fourth, technological innovation can be a powerful tool against discrimination. The siblings' AI platform evolved to address the very injustice they experienced. Perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrates that standing firm against discrimination, even when it would be easier to surrender, creates ripples that extend far beyond individual incidents. By refusing to give up their seats, Zion and Zara sparked industry-wide reforms that protected countless future travelers. Their courage reminds us that meaningful change often begins with a single act of principled resistance against injustice. What would you have done in the Caldwells situation? Would you have stood your ground or given up your seats to avoid conflict? Comment below with your thoughts on how you would handle discrimination in public spaces. Have you ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling in transportation, retail, or hospitality? Share your story in the comments. Your experience matters and could help others recognize and address similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach others who need to hear this message of courage and perseverance. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about standing up against injustice and creating positive change in the world. Thank you for watching, and remember, your dignity is not negotiable, and sometimes one brave stand can transform an entire system. May we all find the courage of Zion and Zara when facing injustice in our own lives.